And welcome back again to the MatStats Show, episode 39, as we continue our series into analyzing the National Federation of High School State Association statistics. Hopefully, I'm the only one that has to say that. That's NFHS. For those of you keeping track at home, this is also in tandem with the NWCA survey. Again, our parent company. Last episode, we talked about the growth rates of boys and girls high school wrestling. One thing I want to clarify, we talked about it briefly, and it was on a slide. Glenn had talked about high school wrestling being the 8th most popular sport. That was in terms of total teams. In terms of individual participation, we are still 6th. We reclaimed that. We were 5 for a long, long time through the early 90s. Then soccer caught us, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. Cross country caught us a little bit, and then post-COVID, we came back, and our numbers are back to being 6 behind, again, those 5. So I want to clear that up. Also, we decided to do something a little different. Kevin's fresh off a trip to what looks like Kazakhstan. No, we got those hats in Kazakhstan. I'm getting geared up for Husky hockey and wrestling this weekend at St. Cloud State. After coming off a trip to Iowa, I got to announce Iowa State at Carver Hawkeye. That was a thrill. And then Glenn is going. I'm guessing that's the 2003 hat from Kansas City.
Yes,
if I remember that logo. That was my second nationals, and that was 21 years ago. So he's going Poobah. I'm going a little hockey from my buddy Andy, the equipment manager of St. Cloud. So we can get off the shiny, back to the shiny dome now. So we decided to mix it up because headwear, we got wrestling shirts. We all have wrestling shirts like crazy. I'm also a hat guy, and I'd say my Huskies have some pretty solid hats, and then wrestling hats I might have 50 to 60 wrestling hats. So I probably can do wrestling hat a day in not May. I need to do, maybe I'll do a different hat and a different shirt for wrestling shirt a day in May. Maybe we can talk to Jim Dutrow. We can do a MatStats show about what he's done. He's also a Virginia guy, but that's where we're at. We're leading into episode 39, continuing on, Glenn. So I would love to catch up on how you've been since last show, but I got a feeling it wasn't that long ago.
So much has changed in my life.
So much has changed. The only thing that's changed is our hats and maybe our clothing. Yes, you can probably read between the lines on that. So as we start off every show, I'm going to steal Glenn's thunder on this one because it's fresh in the memory. Be true to your school. I was a big school spirit guy in high school. At one time, my wrestling coach in high school, Billy Ruff, famously tells the story about my involvement when I got into wrestling. He goes, when I found you, you were wearing a basketball on your head. That is a true statement because in 1996-97, actually 95-96 was Coach Ruff's first year. Then I got into wrestling, and then I didn't come out for the team till later that year. So that junior year was Coach Bob Baker's last year as our boys basketball coach. We were trying to drum up some support. So I was actually a short-lived mascot for the basketball team that I believe went 1-22 that year. After we got beat by Nansemond River High School by 80 points, I had signs. I had an old jersey. I had a basketball that was spray-painted maroon and gold with eyes cut out. I was that guy. I was like, we had a lot of seniors that were pretty good. At least they'd school me in open gym, so I figured they've got to be pretty good, right? So I briefly had a time as a mascot in high school to try to drum up some school spirit. As the sports editor of the newspaper, I was always trying to drum up, okay, we've got a big game against, York coming up. We need everybody there. More people would go watch the fight in the parking lot than watch the football game. So I always try to drum up the school spirit. So be true to your school, Glenn. That is something that I hold dear to my heart because I was also very true to that school in Norfolk, which was not true to 60 years of alumni. And I now, again, we talk about how our different hats. So St. Cloud State, for example, I got into with hockey with them. I'm also their wrestling announcer now. They've adopted me as one of their own, even though I don't announce the Division II, so I can have a little bit of a rooting interest on how they do. I'm a hired gun there, so I'm true to my schools. They may not be always true to some of us, but in this case, I love the fact that you went with "Be True to Your School" as our theme here because we're talking high school. And who doesn't love the Beach Boys? And
exactly,
as a kid, they were always on Full House for some reason. They were there. And they had the Kokomo song in the 90s. And then, I don't know. I was always a fan of the Beach Boys.
Yeah, they made a good living singing fun songs. So anyway.
They were fun, right? Yeah. I mean, they were fun when Kevin had hair.
Yeah.
And now you're a Beach Boy, Kevin. You live at the beach.
I am
Yes.
at the beach.
Down by the beach, boy. Anyway, we're having a lot of fun. We're going to get right to the meat and potatoes of the matter, unlike last show, which we spent 20 minutes talking about things before we got to it. So we're going to go through it. I will actually save Glenn a lot of time here, other than I will let him introduce his friends here as we talk about high school before we get through our rigmarole of our normal show prep.
Okay, what I'm just going to say here is the glue that held Tribe Wrestling together is now holding the glue together for this MatStats show. Okay.
Yep. And our shoulders. Again, our table of contents here. As we know, each show we've got that. Why do we do it? Like I said, I'm going to make sure we rifle through this. Again, the NWCA, the parent company of MatStats here, we created MatStats. Actually, Glenn created a MatStats thing, and then it morphed into this show, which is a library. As always, Glenn likes his Bruce Springsteen reference here, so I will not take that from him. Glenn, you may speak now.
That's not a Bruce Springsteen, I feel like.
Excuse
a number.
Me.
That's Bob Seger.
Bob Seger, my bad. It was another old rocker from the 70s and still kind of, just make sure you just don't mess up the night moves.
Yeah.
And of course, from the 80s, and of course, our favorite glass repair shop in Yorktown, Virginia, Danny's Glass, 867-5309, because, Tommy Two-Tone had a thing. Glenn, the opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily ours. Oh, wait, they're ours. They're just not the NWCA's. Always.
Correct. And it doesn't mean that Gormley, Bryant, Hauser always agree with each other. The opinions are derived from the stats.
Yeah, you should hear the show calls before we start. We are just like, I've got nothing nice to say about these. No, we're kidding. Matter of fact, Kevin was super great in the last couple weeks. Sending, my daughter had a medical issue, and he was sending cards and thank yous. And I'm sitting there like, man, people still write letters and write things on cards. They don't just get a card and sign them. So thank you for that. That was very appreciated from not just me and my daughter, but my wife also appreciated it because she's still got family members that do the handwritten Christmas notes too. So we've got that. So
okay, MatStats. First of all, we're happy that Jason's with us, and we're even more happy that his daughter's back in school. MatStats and everyone else in the wrestling community's hearts go out to the Bryant family and wishing their daughter continued success.
Yep, she's back at school. I'm not going to go into details on what it was, but let's just say November was rough. But we are back. She's back in 7th grade and enjoying her friends. Happy Harry Potter, Pokemon Quiz Bowl, and she's a lot like her dad in terms of the nerdy things she's into. So love that.
Well, we're glad she's better. Okay, and we're going to just flip right down to episode 10 now. Okay, about the number of teams. And nothing has really changed since we recorded the last show on the number of teams. It's still 508. And Keystone, it would have been better if Keystone would have dropped in the 5-minute break we took. Then something would have changed. Okay, so there's 508 men and women's teams. Okay, and I'm going to read this again to you guys because this is an important thing in case you don't watch the previous show. This is from the NCAA website on their sports sponsorship and participation rates report. I quote this. Between 1956-57 and 81-82, participation rates were collected in 5-year intervals. The data for these years was not collected in the same manner as the data from 1982 to the present, and it includes recreational programs. Therefore, these data are not directly comparable to other data in this report. This information is only meant to provide an historical view. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to include the NCAA on this show's collegiate update. The NWCA includes the NCAA on their website, division sites tabs. The NCAA is one of 3 collegiate wrestling national governing bodies to deal with 4-year colleges. It was founded in 1997. In addition to athletic departments, the NCAA recognizes programs developed under alternative administrative bodies, including student services and sports club departments. It's a misnomer to believe that NCAA is a club sport. It is intercollegiate. The C stands for collegiate, not club.
Yeah, and one thing also to know about, yes, there are a lot. The majority of the NCAA is clubs. Now, That doesn't mean they're all clubs, because there are funded varsity programs like the Newport News Apprentice School. Let's use them for an example, because I grew up in the shadow of them. My mom worked at the shipyard there for a long time. So I have an intricate knowledge of that program. They pay their athletes. Now, in the era of NIL, who knows what's going to happen now, but they're a trade school and they pay their athletes. So you're in school half the year, you're out of school half the year. They don't qualify for NCAA sponsorship. They're not a junior college. They are not a 4-year degree granting school, so the NAIA doesn't have them as accountable opponent, but they're a varsity program, and they have been a varsity program for, I want to say, at least 75 years. So the NCWA has provided a place for the apprentice school, for junior colleges that may be off in the Netherlands with no close teams, or the USCAA, U.S. Small College Athletic Association. So there are varsity programs that have no place to go, and this is where the NCWA has provided an option for wrestling. So yes, C stands for collegiate, C does not stand for club, even though there are some really, really good club programs, like Liberty, for example, really well-funded club program that are one of the juggernauts of the NCWA. So yes, it's a misnomer. It's collegiate. It's a mashup of people that love the sport of wrestling and they just want to compete. So kudos to Jim and that group down there. Been doing it 25 years plus.
And now that we've learned what I just read about the NCAA, about the way it's changed from previous to 1982, we don't know if they included recreational programs or how many they did or whatnot. So MatStats is now going to include the NCWA in our numbers. Now, one thing I want to explain to you guys, NCAA is National Collegiate Athletic Association. NAIA is National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. NCWA is National Collegiate Wrestling Association. The national, the collegiate or intercollegiate, and NAIA, it's the same word. And association, all the same. The only difference is the one letter. Two say athletics because they cover a lot of sports. Mm-hmm. Jim's organization only covers wrestling. So it says W. The NWCA has rules and regulation much like the NCAA. You have to go through a clearinghouse, okay, in order to be eligible. One of the beauties of the NCWA, it has lower budget requirements. The NAIA motto is maximize your return on athletics. The NCWA even goes a step further. And I want to tell you the difference between the NCWA and the majority of club stuff. Let's just say Gorms right now was a PhD student at Tennessee. I'm not. Okay. But if I was, I asked Jim this. I would not be allowed to wrestle in the NCWA. He told me because my eligibility was out in the 70s. It was out in the 80s, not the 70s. Okay. But I would be allowed.
1880s?
1880s, yes. Yes. I would be allowed to play on the flag football, the stats program against the chem program, whatever. Okay. So it is a much higher level than just what a lot of people are thinking of as club wrestling. So with this being said, if you add the NCWA to the normal slide we do in the end, there are now 481 men's teams. I did not double count the schools that are transitioning into the NCAA, nor did I count the 9 trade or JUCO teams. But I did count the schools for Puerto Rico, because if we count Simon Fraser in Canada, we sure as heck should count somebody for Puerto Rico, since Puerto Rico is part of the country and Canada is just our friendly neighbor to the north.
And I looked this up today. So Jonathan Smith wrestled at the World Championships for Puerto Rico. He's from California, but he had a stop at Cerritos in California. He had a stop at Presbyterian, but he wrestled for what I was like, Caribbean. What is that? No. There's a Caribbean University, and I believe that is in Bayamon or something like that. So the NCWA took their nationals to Puerto Rico one year. And they've got those colleges have teams within the NCWA, just like in north of the border, Douglas College in Canada, also an NCWA team. More back in the day than they were. Maybe they might still currently compete, but I know that's a school that's been in there. So so there was NCWA representation at the World Championships this year. So strange for those that don't know it.
Yeah.
All right. Kevin, what do you got?
All right. These are the glory days of collegiate wrestling.
Now,
The
that's a Bruce
NCAA
Springsteen song. I do know that.
The glory days is, or it's a restaurant, The
Yeah.
NCAA was designed to fill in a gap in the wrestling community, and there were cutbacks, etc. Jim saw not really an opportunity; he saw a need, and he filled it. And he's helped us say they're more intercollegiate four-year teams now than ever, men's and women's. Okay, now let's start the show. Gorms, what did we find
Okay.
out about the surveys?
Okay. Episode 39 is an analysis of the NWCA surveys and questionnaires sent to all 50 states. What we're trying to do here is find out from the questions we asked on what's going on and how we can help grow the sport. Okay. On the boys' side, on slide 18, you can see there were 6 questions asked. Number 1, this is all for boys now. Do you run a state association sanctioned individual boys tournament? Number 2, how many divisions are there in the boys individual state tournament? Number 3, how many weight classes? Number 4, do you keep score at the individual boys state tournament? Number 5, do you run a state sanctioned boys dual meet tournament? And number 6, if you do run a dual meet tournament, when is it held? So, to look at the first question about do you have an individual state tournament? All 50 states do. So we cannot say one state has more wrestlers or has better growth because it has a state tournament. Since everyone has one, we had to ask the question to make sure, and we found that out.
Well, Glenn, wouldn't that serve as a control, I guess? If everything is the same, if everything has an individual tournament, wouldn't everything else other than that, wouldn't that serve as a control if I understand how the scientific method and statistics and all that work?
I think I understand what you're saying, Jason. We couldn't say whether having an individual state tournament helps or hurts the sport because everyone has it.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Like,
what I'm saying is like, if we're comparing it to other things, wouldn't an individual state tournament serve as the control factor? Like, this is the same across. This is what does not change.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. But I guess a way to put it would be if everyone was 6'6" tall in a basketball game, we could not say whether height had any advantage in basketball because everyone's the same height.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right.
Okay. And none of us on this show are 6'6".
No. And I don't think Jason might be the only one that's 6 foot.
I'm 5'10" and a half and shrinking.
Yeah. I used to say
I've been
that
5'11".
too,
Last time I was 5'10" and 3/4. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. So like we just said, all 50 states have an individual state tournament. DC has a boys and girls tournament. And then if we have that, we never need to ask this question again. What do we learn about the number of divisions and its effect on wrestling growth?
Okay. There is no correlation between the number of boys participants and the number of divisions, nor is there for population and divisions. The populations and divisions surprise me because you would figure the largest states, California, would have many, and the smallest states, Wyoming would have a few. So that is surprising to me on that. Now, with the number of divisions, it runs, as you can see, from 1 division to 7. Okay. 2 states I didn't get the proper answers for. They had conflicting answers in this, so I didn't include them in it. Okay. But you can see there on slide 22 that if you have 1 division, how many states have that, and the participation growth rate. Okay. 5 only has 3 states, 5 divisions has 3 states. States with 6 divisions are 2, states with 7 is 1. So in other words,
I had a question on this too. So we're looking at, this is only as good as the data provided. So for example, Georgia, we know has X amount of state tournaments, but they also have 2 private school divisions. So I guess some of the devil's in the details on how each state reported or how the data was collected. So like Virginia has 6 public school state championships. They have one private school. So in this case, is that a 6 state or is that a 7 state? Or is that kind of a gray area with how we're looking at this?
Virginia's a 6 right here.
Okay, so because it's the state association in this case. So in some cases,
Correct.
like Maryland, there's a public school and an independent school. So we're going with Federation of High School State Independent. That makes sense. NFHS. This is Publix. Just to clarify that.
Yes.
Because I'm a minutia guy. I'm a details like, well, what about that? So just if you're watching this, I'm that guy that asked that question that the listener just had to themselves. Like, wait, one state was 7? No, I know of 2 or 3. No, public, there's 1. And I believe that answer is Georgia.
That's correct.
6 is Virginia.
Answer is,
okay.
The answer is Georgia. And since there's so few states with 5, 6, or 7 divisions, we can't analyze anything with that because too small of a number can throw everything off. Okay.
Good to know, just to make sure, because I'm going to ask a stupid question to make sure nobody else is asking the stupid question.
No problem at all. That's why we're here. So when you go down to the states with 1, okay, we see that states with 1 only have a 3.3% growth. And in case you forgot it, we had a growth rate for all boys of 8.3. We said that on the last show. So that's below our growth rate. But if you look at that, once again, there's only 7 states with 1. California has a little bit more than half of all the participants of all states with 1 division. So as California goes, so goes the 1 division. California happens to be, I saw a decrease of 4.1%. So we can't say that 1 division is affecting anything because California just swamps everything with their size. Okay.
Yeah, because we're comparing a California to a Rhode Island and a Kentucky, and that's just not the same.
Correct. There are similar numbers with states with 2, 3, and 4 divisions. Okay. It does not make sense for states with 2 and 4 to grow and 3 to not grow. Okay. It has something to do with the states that select all those things. Okay. Let's not read into something that isn't there. The states' number of divisions have no effect on participation numbers or growth.
I want to touch on that for a second because there's been a really good explanation on that. Maybe we'll dump this into Kevin's questions here, but I'll lead off with this because I had a conversation with Heath Esslinger, the former coach at Chattanooga, a while ago. He's with A Better Way Athletics now, and one of the discussions we had is I feel like 6 for Virginia. Let's use that where I grew up. I feel 6 is too many. I feel 6 is too many individual state championships. I feel the way New Jersey has it is much more workable. 1 individual state championship, but they're multiple classes for their dual meet state championships. They don't keep a team score. We're going to get into that portion here later. But his point, which I didn't necessarily even think about, is activity. Remember, not everybody who wrestles in high school is trying to be an elite Bo Bassett type. Some of them, it's the sport to keep them in shape for football, or it's something to stay busy in the wintertime, or they're just too short for basketball. Some schools have, all right, yeah, you got to play a sport. So the opportunity to have an activity or as Al Bevilacqua used the word activity. It's an activity. It's a sport, but it's something for kids to do. So you have a more equitable distribution of athletes, well, maybe if you've only got X amount of teams you're competing against that are of similar size, it's not as hard for those first and second year kids to get thrown to the line. There's not as many lions to get thrown to, so to speak, when you've diluted the monsters across 6 versus having them all. And okay, your first match you're going to wrestle Great Bridge. Oh no, your first match you're going to wrestle Lakeland. A little bit easier to use 2 Virginia schools, for example. No disrespect to Lakeland High School in Suffolk, but I feel the barrier to entry when there's just when the sport chews you up. I think about, does that lead to the option for more growth, more kids involved? Because hey, everybody can be part of the team. Nobody really wants to be. Nobody joins a sport to be cut and be excluded because it's too hard. Wrestling is inherently hard. So again, looking at the amount of divisions, my opinion kind of changed. Like, okay, I like divisions for dual meets. I like divisions for getting large numbers of kids out because, okay, you got a lot of teams, you got a lot of competition that's equitable size. So I guess I kind of struggle with, surprisingly, that there's not a growth, maybe not yet, or correlation between number of classes and number of kids coming out for teams based on the level of competition. I guess that's also another factor to engage in.
Yeah, and the one thing that I do know about, you talked about Virginia, the number of divisions is set not by the coaches, it's set by the principals. And I don't think that wrestling is really the deciding factor. It's more sports like football, where you've got a school of 800 and a school of 3,000. It's much harder to put together a team where you need 20, 30 minimum in a school of 800 than you do in a school of 3,000. So it's really set for more of the larger sports, and we're just in there. But what we're talking about, that let's just go looking at the data. I think we let the states decide the number of divisions at the boys individual state tournaments. And again, that's set by other factors, not just including wrestlers. No statistical evidence on the number of divisions affecting the growth rate. There's no correlation between participation numbers of population and number of divisions. Just let the states determine the number. There also could be other logistical numbers, like we just talked about. Principals are making that decision. That said, what did we learn about the number of high school weight classes and growth rates?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm curious on this one. And Glenn, before you dive in, one thing I want to just finish up with, Kevin, is the point we're looking at the size of schools. You know, for example, in Pennsylvania, there's multiple classes for football, but there's 2 classes for wrestling. I wish states would not be so, in some state associations are flexible. Even, and I'm going to point to the VHSL, the Virginia High School League. Again, I haven't lived there in 20 years, but again, I still keep track with what's going on. My high school is in the state high school semifinals in Class 2 or Group 2, whatever the heck they call it now. And, it's like, okay, they're, 650, 700 students versus, the monster schools with over 2,000. Robinson, where your son Brian coached for a long, long time. I think it's 2,000 just in 9 through 12, not counting it's a secondary, so it's 7 through 12. Not an equal playing field in terms of some team sports. But when we look at the states, like, why can't they I hate a rigid, we're 6 classes for basketball, we have to be 6 classes for wrestling. Stop thinking like that. Different individual sports are different than team sports. If you want to make it a team sport, fine, keep your classes at 6. Again, this goes back to my 6 classes, and then if you're individual sport, fine. You think it's still a disparagement? Go 2 individual classes and 6 for publics. Let's go with that. Stop. I don't. This is a rant. Sorry, it doesn't really quite fit in. Sound the alarms. But stop being so rigid about one sport. One size fits all for your sports, because that should not be the case. Not all kids are built different. That's why we have different sports. That's why in wrestling we have different weight classes. So why put that square peg in a round hole and apply everything to it? It doesn't work. Anyway, Glenn, you can get me back on track with some stats.
Thank you. I'll get you back on track with the weight classes. Of the 48 states that answered the survey on this, there's 6 states with 13 weight classes, 41 with 14, and 1 with 15. Okay. If you just have one state with 15, you don't know what it means at all, so you don't even have to analyze that. So
we're looking at you, New York. New York's got 15.
Oh, I have them with 13.
Oh, did they change too? Okay, so I remember Texas had an extra weight class. New York had an extra weight class for a long, long time. So anyway, so this is where Glenn corrects me, because I asked a stupid question.
Yeah. So anyway, we analyzed the states with 13 weight classes, and there were 6 states, as we said before, that had it. Okay. The boys' high school growth was a negative 1.1%, where the 14 weight classes was a positive 9.7. If you remember, the overall was 8.3 at that time frame. Okay, so what do we know about these 6 states, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, New Mexico, New York, and PA, okay, that have had these, okay? It really depends on the states that we analyze there. There's not enough states with 13 to really make a judgment. It's, once again, don't read into something that's not there. It could be that those states are states that were decreasing in their population number regardless of the amount of weight classes they have, and those states happen to choose 13. Okay. In the beginning, we said, correlation doesn't prove causation. Okay. Well, in this, just one group of 6 random schools decreasing doesn't mean it's the weight class that's doing it.
All right. I want to go back to that slide 26 here for a second because I live in Minnesota and we're one of those 13 class states. And I went to a couple dual meets last year because the school district. I'm going to create an edit point there. Hold on. Phlegm went down the inhale. All right. Let me start that whole sentence over again. So I want to go back to Minnesota here because obviously I live here now and we're one of those. Damn it. Double farts. Spalding. All right. We ready? Or am I ready? That's the thing. All right. Take 4. I want to go back to Minnesota because I live here and we were one of those states with 13. I went to a. Hold on. Yeah, Glenn, you dropped out?
Yeah, you froze up, so I reloaded.
No, I didn't freeze up. I was holding.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. Take 6. I want to go back to Minnesota here. I'm going to go back to slide 26 because we're one of those states, and I live here now. I've mentioned Virginia a lot, but I'm in Minnesota now for those who weren't aware. We're one of those 13 weight classes. I went to a couple dual meets last year. The school district I'm in, Mounds View High School, was a really, really good team. They won the section. They were in the state tournament, got past that blockade that was Stillwater High School. And the 13 weights, and I'm sitting there watching, I'm looking, and first thing I had to do was remember what they were because and thankfully Mounds View High School had the weight classes, had one of those scoreboards where all the weights were up on the screen. And the first time I walk in there, and it was the neighborhood battle, Mounds View and Irondale, the school I'm zoned for, with the 2 high schools in the school district. And I looked and I'm like, okay, wait, 107. I had to figure out what they were. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we've got 3 or 4 different sets of weight classes nationally. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, I wasn't sure if I liked it. And I know at Mounds View, they had a lot of big guys and they lost a big guy weight class. So they had kids kind of shift around. And it was kind of a, I don't know if I like it or not. It really was kind of lukewarm. And the one thing I liked about it immediately was dual meets. If you're doing dual meet, there's number 1 criteria. Most matches won. Problem solved. 7 versus 6 if it ends in a tie. Easy. I love that because nobody likes going to criteria Q, which is play tiddlywinks to figure out who wins. Then Z, I think, is the coin toss. So the surprising number to me, to get to my point, is the fact that the numbers are down from, with 10 years. And I was like, is that a weight class thing? Is that the rise of other sports? What is the difference in Minnesota? Granted, kind of hard to tell from one year to the next with the 13 weights because this is a wrestling state. There's a ton of wrestlers here. We have a lot of co-ops. This may also be a thing where schools are combining and the numbers may look different. One school reporting, one school not. So I'm curious if co-ops work there. That's another tangent. But as far as one year to the next, I like 13. At one point, you're looking like, well, you're losing opportunities for kids. Well, there's nothing wrong with being JV. We need to bring back JV teams too. Just because you're not starting doesn't mean you can't compete in the sport. Another tangent. So looking at the 13 from a firsthand perspective, didn't hate it. Again, probably lukewarm to it, but logically you'd think, oh, one less weight class means one less participant times X amount of schools theoretically. But I don't know, Glenn, what's the data tell you?
Well, the data tells me that there's a couple states there, Minnesota being one where Jason lives, that happens to be down 13%, and New York that happens to be down 15%. My theory is on this: if you were to bump Minnesota and New York to 14 weights, they would still be down by that much. Okay, and then all of a sudden the 13 thing would look good. That would look bigger than the 14, and we'd be sitting here saying, should we go from 14 to 13?
Gotcha.
I think it's a factor of states happen to choose that and they were down. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. So that said, let's let the states decide how many weight classes they have at their individual state tournaments. There are not enough states with 13 weight classes definitively say that the number of weight classes affects the growth rates. Like you said, you move two over from 13 to 14, it changes the numbers completely. Let the states decide. And again, going back to the questionnaire, what did we learn about keeping a team score at the individual state tournament and how that affected numbers?
Okay, the team score was the most interesting thing I dove into. Okay, no individual team score kept, 8 states. Okay, their growth rate was -4. Individual team score kept of the 40 states that responded to this, their growth rate was +12. Okay, so that looks like, and once again, 8.3 is the overall thing. So this does lead me to believe what's going on here. Okay, now if you look at the next slide, with the slide 30 there, with the 8 states that do not keep score: Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Jersey, New York, South Carolina, Wisconsin. Okay,
It's across the board in terms of its participation rank. First thing that jumps out at me, you have a 3, you have a 25, you have a 6, a 7, and an 18. So they're all in the top 25, but
yes,
it's across that top half.
The state participation numbers in the top half. The state growth numbers are 34.5. They're all in the bottom half. 34.5 was the mean. Okay. And they actually shrank there. So what did we learn from this? Okay. So I dove deeper into the states that did this. Okay. Because this is a big time conundrum. Okay. If you look at slide 32, okay, we would have to, it really depends on what states you choose, on whether they keep score or not. Okay. If we would control for some of these states, some of these big states that have been around for a while, that are shrinking: New York, Minnesota. Okay. Pause a second there. Pause. Yeah, I'm okay. I was just trying to figure something out. Okay, I got it. We'll go back.
Start 32 over again?
Uh, yes.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, there's 8 states that do not keep score at their individual state tournament. Okay, so their growth rate was down, like we said, a little bit over 4% down. Why are these 8 states down, and why is the number down? Okay, if you would control for some of these states that have a big decrease, it would be really difficult to say whether not keeping team scores really affects this thing. Okay, but we have a decrease in this situation. We cannot ignore these 8 states. We need to dive deeper into why these 8 states do not keep score. I don't know what the reason is, but in the questionnaire for next year, we need to ask them some questions. It could just be logistics, or we do it with a dual meet tournament and decide our state champion. It could be a lot of different reasons, but these are 7 of these 8 states are really mature, great states of wrestling: Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Jersey, New York, Wisconsin. South Carolina is the only new guy in the game. So there's something going on with those states. And I would like to know if this has anything to do with it. Just as an old wrestler, an old wrestling coach, it would be surprising to me if that really affected participation numbers, because, like we've talked many times about Brian Hazard's team, Robinson, they had a chance to win the state title and oftentimes did. Most high schools have no chance to win it. So I don't know, Kevin, Jason, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the team score matters, but the problem is the team score doesn't matter. I realize I said it's a complete contradiction what I said, but I am a fan of the dual meet determining your state title at the high school level because of equitable school sizes. So in Minnesota, I've been to the state tournament a couple times. Usually when I buy a ticket, because the state association doesn't like to credential me. Another topic entirely. But they do the state tournament Thursday. The team states Thursday. Then Friday, Saturday is the individual tournament. Makes for a long weekend at the Xcel Energy Center, which is a great place to watch hockey. It's a great place to watch wrestling. It is a great facility. But they determine the team champions by dual meets. And if there is a tie in the finals, there is no criteria. You're co-champions. So the one thing I love about the dual meet state tournament aspect is you've got your whole town, per Minnesota, Pipestone, Minnesota. They call it outstate. If you don't live in the Twin Cities, anything outside, these outstate towns, peers, they bring these teams, the busloads and busloads of fans. Last one out of town, turn off the light kind of place. That's high school sports to me. You bring that energy to an arena. That to me is I think better for growth, because then you've got the kid who's watching a dual meet going to watch his buddy wrestle. I'm going to come out for the team next year. Or the girls like, oh, I want to wrestle now. Like, you have an opportunity, I think, to be a team. When you're an individual, when you're a team, there is an I in team in wrestling, because we've learned, like, you can have 3 guys win a state title and place in the top 5. So where's the team? Okay, you could be 0-26 in dual meets with 3 wrestlers and place top 5 at a team. From a sports-minded logic, that doesn't seem to make sense. So I hate team scoring in a tournament format, because I feel it's extremely arbitrary, and it's always one of those rules that's like, well, that's because we've always done. I feel, if, again, equitable school sizes at high school sports give you dual meets that are put school versus school, town versus town, it's inherently more sporting, surrounded by an individual combat sport, which is hand-to-hand, man, like the best part about wrestling and the best part of a team sport. Then you still get the cherry on top. You get the best individual gets determined they're the best wrestler in the state, regardless of whether they're from Pipestone, Minnesota, or they're from St. Paul. So that opportunity, that, like, the team score, you can't even keep it by yourself in the stands. And I've made this argument with the NCAA championships. You can keep your own team score, but can you keep 60 other team scores simultaneously? You need a computer. You cannot do it as a general fan of the sport. You cannot score it. Okay, we got 3 for that round. Okay, we got +2 advancement, +1.5 for the tech fall. Okay, what did Apple Valley got? What Shakopee got? What about what about Moorhead? You can't keep track of everybody else's scores. But in a dual meet, you've got 2 teams to worry about. So I don't really care about an individual state team score at a state tournament, because, you can have 5 guys and win a state title. There's 14 weight classes. You've got a third of a team, and you can win a team. So that's my rant on team scoring.
I tend to agree, but the only thing I would do different, I wouldn't run them all in the same weekend. I think that's
tough.
Not fair
Yes.
to the teams that have the kids that are on real good teams. They've had to wrestle a couple of matches. They take a chance of injury. They're more tired. It's a mental thing to try and stay up for that, and then go right into an individual tournament. I think is not beneficial.
Yeah, and Iowa's had that problem where they've basically, they've had state tournament teams where it's like, all right, we're going to wrestle our B team in the state duels, for example. One thing I do like that Minnesota does with their dual meets, though, you can't forfeit and bump away from studs. You've got to put a body there. So if I was at a sectional tournament here a couple years ago when I learned this rule right down the block at Totino Grace. You don't forfeit. If you forfeit it, say at 145 or whatever the weight class is now, that round, you're forfeiting that for the next round, the rest of the day. So you've got to put a body out there. That you can bump your lineup around, but you're not going to give a forfeit. You're not going to feed a forfeit to their stud. You've got to feed a body there, or else you're forfeiting the rest of the way. I like that to make sure you're putting bodies out there. So that's another thing too. It also helps you comb the high schools and get better team rosters, because you need depth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never heard that one before.
Little tangent, yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
Moving on.
All right, so we'll move on to slide 34 here about the dual meet state championships. Okay, there's 21 states that have a dual meet tournament and 29 that do not. Okay, the number of the participation growth for the dual meet tournament side is 5% and 11% for no dual. Okay. So, in other words, it looks like the no dual is the better road to take. However, if we control for Illinois, Minnesota, and New York, which we've learned earlier are states that are shrinking, okay, the growth rate for the remaining 18 states would be plus 13. If we include the control for California in that, the growth rate is 20. So this is one I really dove into also with the team scoring. So there's a lot to interpret from this analysis. But really, what does it mean? Okay, because once again, we go back to the states. If you have a statistician, if you give a statistician enough time, you see this on slide 36, okay, they can tell you anything. How do you think we created the mythical clutch hitting stat in baseball? It's a completely made up stat where there's just arbitrary terms for what determines clutch hitting and what doesn't. Okay, liars, damn liars, and statisticians. So having the dual meet state tournament could be a state by state decision based on tradition, budget, travel, season being too long. Heck, Minnesota might do it right in the same weekend because of a travel budget. I don't know. You know, there's so many moving parts here that we cannot definitively say if having a state dual meet tournament affects the numbers.
I have another caveat to dive into too, is the bracket styles. Minnesota is still archaic and it does not do full wrestlebacks. It's still got the first round. The first round, if you lose a match, the guy who beat you, guy or girl that beat you, has to win their next match. You still, in this day and age, have 0-1 participants at a state tournament. To me is one of the dumbest things. If you're going to wrestle that way, like you need full wrestlebacks. You need the full. You get the state champ and he gets upset. Sorry, your whole season's done. I hate that. That's another thing maybe is looking into potential growth is how the individual brackets are done. New Jersey's got this giant bracket. California's got this giant bracket. Well, then Virginia's got a 12-man bracket in Class 1 and Class 2, and then they've got a 16-man bracket in 3, 4, 5, and 6. So something to look at potentially moving forward.
Okay, slide 37.
All right. So looking at the data, it sounds like listening to you, Glenn. There are some you can look at the statistics, but there are so many other factors that we really don't know if it has an effect on the growth, and we don't know what the driving force is. So let the states decide. And what did we learn? But now, what did we learn about when the states have their dual meet tourney?
Okay. 21 states have a dual meet tournament that we talked about. Only 2 have this dual meet tournament after the individual tournament. So we cannot determine anything by the timing of when they have their dual meet tournament, if it affects growth or not, because with only 2 states, it's too small of a window. Okay. Kevin, slide 40.
Okay, so to summarize, MatStats recommendations from the boys' high school questionnaire. All states have an individual state tournament. Let the states decide how many divisions they have. Let the states decide how many weight classes they have. We really need to do a follow-up questionnaire in 2025 on the states that do not keep team scores at their individual state tournaments to find out, if there are other reasons. There are too many moving parts on the dual meet tournament to say if it helps or hurts the growth in these states. In our follow-up questionnaire for 2025, we need to find out how long before the individual tournament the dual tournament is. Enough about the boys. Now, let's go examine the girls' questionnaire.
Okay. And just so I review this, what I talked about in the last show, girls is a growth business, boys is a mature business. That does not mean physical, emotional maturation. It means length of time that sport's been around. There are 7 questions on the girls' side The last 6 are identical to the 6 on the boys, but the first one is, are girls permitted to wrestle boys in your state? Okay, so let's start out with that. Okay, there's 3 categories in this classification. One is girls always wrestle girls. Next is girls must wrestle girls starting at the states. And the third one is girls can wrestle boys anytime. The mean number of participants in the states are much higher with the girls wrestling girls than they are when girls can wrestle boys anytime. Okay. The number of states that have girls versus girls always is 20. Girls versus girls starting the states 10. Girls can wrestle boys anytime 20. The mean state participation rank is much better for girls that wrestle girls. Despite when girls always wrestle girls, the mean population rank is higher than when girls can wrestle girls. Girls can wrestle boys at any time. So, by that theory, it's not so much a state with a low population that you can't find enough girls to wrestle girls, but it's difficult to tell with that. Okay. We learned in part 1 of this topic that the correlation between girls participants and the state population is very strong at 0.8, but not as strong as the boys at 0.9. Does this explain the difference in correlation? Is it because states that do not allow girls to wrestle boys have more participants? It's possible. Okay. Do states allow girls to wrestle boys due to lack of numbers, or the lack of numbers due to that they allow girls to wrestle boys? It's a chicken or egg argument. To somebody out there who has a young daughter that wants to wrestle, do you want to wrestle boys? Does the girl want to wrestle boys? I don't know. I mean, as we're getting more and more numbers in our sport, girls' numbers in our sport, I'm all for pushing states to have girls versus girls only. Okay. Of the top 10 states with the number of 4-year women's collegiate teams, only 2 allow girls to wrestle boys at any time, Michigan and New York. So it does seem that these states are going in this direction, because we looked at it in the previous part 1 of this show, and there is a moderate correlation between the number of girls, high school participants, and the number of 4-year colleges that have girls, where boys there's none whatsoever. So my thoughts on there is, Kevin, see what you got for my.
I think what you say is girls need to wrestle girls. And it sure seems we should emphasize girls only wrestling girls. And I think you're starting to see that as because as you get more girls into wrestling, there there are more opportunities for matches. I know 20 years ago, when you saw a girl wrestle, there weren't girls teams, and they'd have to make the boys line up to get out and wrestle. As the numbers have increased, and every state, and I guarantee we go through the numbers, every state that now has better numbers, there's more opportunity for girls just wrestling girls. That said, what did we learn about girls running an individual state tournament and those growth rates?
Okay, much like on the boys' side, 45 states now have a girls' individual state tournament where the boys have all 50. So we can't really say whether having the state individual tournament helps the numbers or not. But last year when we did this show, show on women's, we looked into, you see this on slide 49, on after the state sanctions, the growth rate. So in other words, right after the state sanction, within a year, okay, you saw almost, what was it? All the states had a state tournament within a year after that. Okay. So when you look at the numbers that are increasing, they increase far more once the state sanctioned and has an individual state tournament than they did before that. Okay. Now, with that, I learned something really interesting when I was talking to Lori Ayers about this, about it really depends on what your definition of sanctioning is. Okay. I always thought there was a firm sanctioning thing. Lori's told me that in some of the states, they've already been sanctioned to sport, and they just add women section of the tournament. Just like there's a boys and girls volleyball, we already had wrestling sanctioned. We just added a boys division. So that's what happens in some of these states. So it's not more of a thorough process than, hey, please add a girls division, or we'll call our attorney and then you're going to add it anyway. Okay. So I'm not so sure how everyone uses the term sanctioning, and if you want to hear really something that spurred from this conversation I had with Lori, this is what made me look into the NCWA and exactly what it is and what those letters stand for and why they should be included in our thing to include the NCAA and NAIA.
Yeah, and one thing also to look at is sanction PA was a buzzword. It was a hashtag because Pennsylvania had made the point that the PIAA was not going to sanction girls high school wrestling until they had 100 programs commit or start teams. So that was one. Whereas the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, it was like, okay, we got number, boom, we're sanctioned. It's like they had to hit certain benchmarks. There's benchmarks, and then there's, like, as you said through your conversation with Lori, like, all right, well, just okay, girls are good. Just add the section in the rule book. Like, some states are so rigid, and then Virginia is still listing as an emerging sport because, again, I've beaten the VHSL up for probably 20 years at this point. So what's another 10 seconds? Because the VHSL is slow to act on the culture of sports. It's So anyway, you're right. It does vary, and what the VHSL thinks is sanctioning, it might be good enough for them, whereas for rational wrestling people, it isn't. So there's my last zinger across the board at the VHSL.
It's interesting, Jason, because as I said earlier, 36 states had a girls' state tournament 1 year or less after sanctioning. So, maybe it came about for different reasons, but I'm all for every state, 50 states plus DC, having girls wrestling at a girls' tournament.
Well, I'm just wondering, and here's another point. Well, you can't have it until you have this many. What's stopping you? You got to start. You crawl before you can walk. Okay, because one year you have 8 at a weight class, and then you have maybe 16 at another, and 24 at another, or you got to wait till you get all 24 filled, for example. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You need to, you show the opportunity exists. It's like, okay, it's again, they may see a chicken and egg. We're like, no, give them the opportunity. Let's put it out there, sanction the thing, then it will fill up. That's how it's going to work. That's how it's shown to work. Your stats validate this. The growth of numbers, once you've had a tournament, boom, explode. Start the dang tournament.
Yes. Slide 52, Kevin.
There
we go.
They will come.
Didn't I just? Weren't we just talking about this before the show, Kevin?
Just said. And it's no surprise that once the states get sanctioned that has an individual state tournament, there's extreme growth. We talked about Virginia. They had an unofficial tournament. I don't remember what year it was. They had 100 plus girls. The next year, with emerging sports status, they had an official state tournament. They'd have 30, 40 girls in a weight class. There was explosive growth the next year. To the point where I think they're going to have to maybe right now it's a one tournament for all divisions. As it grows, you're going to see that divide up into the divisions like the boys. It's the world's oldest and greatest sport. We ignored women for way too long. We can't change it, but we are changing the future. So we just talked a little bit about it. What did we learn about the number of divisions and weight classes of girls, individual states, and how that affects growth?
Okay. Just like on the boys' side, let the states make their own decisions on number of divisions and weight classes. The data for the number of divisions and weight classes is far too new for girls to really draw any conclusions. So we just go, with what we said before on a part of the sport that's more established, boys wrestling, and just follow that lead.
Let the states decide. And just like with the boys, let the states decide on how many divisions the girls have for in wrestling. That said, what did we learn from if they keep score at the state individual tournaments? If if they have a dual meet tournament, and if they do, when is the dual meet tournament?
Okay. Only 10 states do not keep score at their individual state tournament for girls, and only 4 have a dual meet tournament. So we cannot say anything about the dual meet tournament affecting it because there aren't enough of them yet. So it doesn't matter whether it's before or after if there's only 4. Okay. What we said was let the states decide. We wanted to ask some more questions about why states don't keep score. I'm sure it's the same thing like these states don't keep it boys, girls, and some other situations and decide with their dual meet tournament and all that stuff. But this, in my mind, this is a state by state issue. We don't have any numbers in there to definitively say. Slide 56.
I love the quotes. A rising tide lifts all boats. Is that Reagan? We're on the ground. No politics. Sorry.
I don't know.
We're
Maybe
on
it's
the ground floor.
Confucius.
Could
I
be.
think it's long before the Kipper.
We are on the ground floor of women's wrestling. We have huge growth. Just enjoy it. Gorms believes we should stress girls wrestling girls. The answer to the last 6 questions on the state girls questionnaire is let the states decide. Enjoy the ride. We spent enough time on the boys' side on this 2-part topic. Give us some other news on the women for balance.
Okay. Now, the next slide we have on here is women's participation numbers from 81-82 to 23-24 in the NCAA. And you can see all the growth that's happening in women's sports. Okay. Obviously, wrestling is on the ground floor of this in the NCAA level. Okay. Then, if you look at the number of high school participants, all right. If you remember from the last show, wrestling is 64th women. It's above field hockey, about to pass indoor track and golf here soon, and most likely lacrosse in a couple years. If you look at that and divide that by the number of teams, NCAA teams, okay, you have a ratio here, okay, which wrestling, I have 2 numbers for it on slide 61. 846 is with all the teams that were active, and 601 is the announced. Women's wrestling, if you put aside Spirit, that does have any NCAA teams, women's wrestling has by far the highest ratio of high school participants over NCAA teams. I remember back when I was dealing with some of the alumni from Lehigh, and the rumor was that people inside Lehigh said there's not enough girls wrestlers, but they have a rowing team, which is on the bottom of this. So, my conclusion to this is wrestling is going to continue to grow, women's wrestling. I am saying within 10 years, and we'll all still be on this show in 10 years. I'm not punching out anytime soon. Okay. In 10 years, there will be more NCAA women's wrestling teams than there are Division I football teams right now. That's Division I and 1AA combined. As a matter of fact, there's almost as many women's teams as there are 1A football teams right now. There's 134 1A football teams, 170 wrestling. So that's what I'm saying on this. We talked, I just wanted to put a good note on there and put some extra stuff about women in there to make the women feel good that we have balanced time here.
I got something for that if you want to throw some balance time. Here's something I want to look at, we've touched on this every time we talk about women's wrestling. We talk about the growth of women's wrestling and supporting women's wrestling. So I went back and looked at the high school stats from the NFHS, and let's use some increments here. So let's start 1970. And I'm going to bring my my notebook into frame, not in a frame here, but I'll read it off so I'm not looking down. 1970. I'm going to compare 3 sports. I'm going to look at the growth rates. Actually, I got a couple sports. So girls soccer. Let's look at girls soccer. 1971, 700 high school participants nationwide. Boys soccer, 1970 when they first started tracking, 49,000. Let's jump ahead 20 years. Girls soccer, 111,000. Boys up to 220,000. 20 more years. Boys soccer has since passed wrestling as the fifth most popular boys sport. Boys soccer, 391,000 plus. Girls soccer, 356,000 plus.
Wow.
2024, boys soccer, 467. That's thousands. Girls, 383. Boys soccer and girls soccer grew together at the high school level. Granted, boys were ahead, but when it came to the mid-90s, you started getting a lot more girls soccer teams. And that's, I graduated high school in 1997. We started a girls soccer team that year. So that's 27 years ago. That's still a 20-something, 17, 18-year head start on where a lot of these women's college teams came from. Now, other sports that, we look at the numbers like, oh, why aren't we doing this? And are other sports taken away from us? Let's look at lacrosse on just the boys' side. 1970, 2,700 nationwide. 2024, 115,000. So, and boys and girls lacrosse growing together. Boys and girls soccer growing together. The fact they're outdoor sports, I don't know if there's a correlation to that, Glenn. But girls wrestling went from 112 in 1990. That's a 9. That is 1990 to 6,134 20 years later. So there was a growth of 6,000 athletes in 20 years. In the 14 years since that, 64,000 plus girls wrestling, 23-24. So in one 10-year span, there was a gain of 6,000. In one 14-year span, there was a gain of almost 60,000. Look what happens, and look at the boys' participation. Wrestling, it grew from 233,000 in 1990 to 272,000 in 2010 to 291,000. We need to maybe correlate this to be statistically significant. We finally got behind girls wrestling as a sport. Girls wrestling, boys wrestling, growing together. Boys lacrosse, girls lacrosse, growing together. Boys soccer, girls soccer, growing together. That's the key. That is why our growth is happening, because we're doing it as a community, not as boys versus girls. You got them together, our growth numbers are going up. I don't need a stat to tell me that that's statistically significant.
Amen to what you said, Jason.
It's just logic. It's just logic.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to grow together.
And if we would have been behind it in 1990, who knows where our numbers would be? We were just, we're our own worst enemy sometimes, and we have to know that. And again, to know our history, we are not going to make the mistakes of the past by gatekeeping the access to our sport from anybody. So that's what I love about it. So we've seen we're just too late. We're too late. We're so far behind. We're making great gains, but we still need to make sure, hey, we need to know we didn't do things right 30 years ago. Now we're Jason, trying to right those wrongs.
I appreciate you bringing that up, especially the time frame 1990, because my last year coach was right then, was 89. And, I fought them that school in Williamsburg dropping our team. Then a couple of years after that, I never even thought of the women's angle. Okay. And then once that hit me after that, I said, this is what we need in a sport. It's not only the right thing to do, have opportunity for girls, but it's what the boys need too. And I was one of those people that dropped the ball.
I'll point to what Terry Steiner said. The sport is great. Why hold it back from 50% of the population? So, there's some people that are honored. I get your traditional gender roles and your this combat sports aren't for women. Well, that thinking is gone. So move or get run over. That's kind of what we're at because sticking to those guns caused us to get to where we were with when one's not participating, the other one's tanking. When they're both participating, they're both growing.
Yeah.
How can you not see that? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Slide 63, Kevin.
I've got a lot of rants these last two shows.
Yeah.
So I realize that we are a blue ribbon consulting group, even if we do go on rants once in a while. And Gorbs, I remember you telling me that in MBA school you learned the answer to a question on a test can't be hire a blue ribbon consulting group. We MatStats are here to answer these questions. We need to ask additional questions to help us solve the riddle on why some states grow and others do not. And like we said in our last show, if you've got answers or you know why your state's growing, get back to us. MatStats is in the process of formulating the best questions to provide answers from the states that could help us grow our sports. And our follow-up MatStats show in 2025 will provide you the analysis of what we found from the data that we do collect.
Yeah, one thing, thank you for that wrap up, Kevin. One thing I want to say before we get to the Kev's notes is, I was saying I was part of that problem in the late 80s and 90s where we didn't do it. But I want to get across to my, compatriots of that generation. I'll see a bunch of them here soon at the Nationals, is the sport is in good shape right now. There's more high school boys than ever, more high school girls than ever, more NCAA women than ever, more NCAA men most likely than ever, at least since 82. The sport is in good shape. Okay. So let's hear the Kev notes for this show.
To the Kev notes we go.
On to the Kev notes. Note number 1. As of the end of November, there are 508 NCAA NAIA four-year college teams. And if you include the NCWA, there's 714 men's and women's four-year college programs. And that goes to what Glenn just said. We are in great shape as a sport. 2, MatStats believes we should continue to let the states decide on the number of divisions, weight classes, keeping team scores, all of the things that we talked about. Let the states decide. 3, we do need some new questions for the 2025 survey to find out organic reasons that some states have better growth rates than others. 4, the states that have girls only wrestle girls have much better participation numbers than when the girls wrestle boys. 5, once a state sanctions girls wrestling, the numbers increase dramatically. All 50 states have a boys individual state championship. 7, so many moving parts and multi-correlation issues. I don't think we can we can't definitively connect the answers to the 2024 survey questions to the participation and growth numbers. 7, girls have exponential growth. Girls wrestling is a growth sport, boys is a mature sport. 9, like Gorms just said a minute ago, wrestling is in a stronger position on the high school level than it's ever been. And 10, the ratio of high school girls wrestling to the number of NCAA women's team is higher than any other girls sport. 860 some wrestlers, per college team. The room for collegiate growth in women's collegiate wrestling is very strong.
Yeah, thank you for that summary, Kevin. Next month's show is going to be a timely topic. It's going to be the NWCA United States Marine Corps, hoorah, multi-divisional national dual meet championships. We're going to review it, discuss the past, what just happened a couple days before this show comes out. That tournament's January 10th through 11th. This show comes out the 15th. It's a great thing sponsored by the NWCA, and thank you to the United States Marine Corps for being the financial support of this. So that's what we're going to do on next week. On behalf of my fellow hosts, Kevin and Jason Bryant, this is Glenn Gormley signing off for MatStats.